Miranda Ashford was accustomed to perfection. From her meticulously curated wardrobe to the sparkling reputation of Ashford hotels, every detail of her life was a reflection of order and control. Her mornings began with black coffee brewed to exact specifications and ended with Nick Morgan's warm embrace, the one constant in her whirlwind days. At 25, she seemed untouchable, a paragon of success. But life, she would soon learn, had a way of unraveling even the most carefully constructed worlds. It started on a crisp spring evening. The Hotel Gala, an event that celebrated the launch of their newest property in Manhattan, was in full swing. Guests mingled under glittering chandeliers, sipping champagne as jazz filled the air. Miranda, clad in an emerald gown that caught the light with every move, was the center of attention. Nick was by her side, his arm draped protectively over her waist. He was a picture-perfect partner, handsome, charming, and attentive. But there was something in his eyes that night, a flicker of something unspoken. Miranda noticed it but dismissed the thought. She had a speech to deliver, a ballroom to command, and whispers of congratulations to accept. Control was her gift, her armor. What could go wrong? As the night wound down, Miranda and Nick slipped out early, the weight of the evening behind them. They laughed as they climbed into their sleek black sedan, trading quips about some of the evening's more eccentric guests. It wasn't until they hit the highway that Miranda's life took a turn. The headlights came out of nowhere, blinding, relentless. Tires screeched, metal twisted, and Miranda's world exploded into chaos. When she woke, there was only darkness. "Mrs. Ashford, can you hear me?" The voice was soft but insistent. Miranda tried to open her eyes, panic rising when she realized the world around her was shrouded in black. "I can hear you," she croaked, her throat dry and raw. "What? What happened?" "You've been in an accident," the voice explained. "Your vision has been affected, but we're hopeful it's temporary. You'll need time to heal." Temporary. The word echoed in her mind, a fragile thread of hope in an abyss of uncertainty. Nick was at her bedside when the doctors left, his grip firm around her hand. "You're going to be okay," he murmured. "I'll take care of everything." She wanted to believe him. But as the days passed, Miranda found herself trapped in a prison of shadows and dependence. Nick became her lifeline, guiding her through unfamiliar terrain. He handled her emails, made decisions for the business, and shielded her from the outside world. At first she was grateful, but as the weeks stretched into months, unease began to creep in. One afternoon, as she sat in the sunlit corner of their expansive living room, Miranda overheard Nick on a call. His tone was hushed, his words clipped. "We can't delay much longer," he said. "She'll understand when the time is right." Understand what? Miranda's mind raced. "Nick," she called out, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. He appeared moments later, his steps deliberate. "What is it, love? What were you talking about just now?" she asked, tilting her head toward the direction of his voice. "Just business," he said smoothly. "Nothing for you to worry about." But she did worry. Her blindness had rendered her powerless in ways she never anticipated. Once the master of her own destiny, she now relied entirely on Nick's guidance. And while he claimed to protect her, Miranda began to suspect there were things he wasn't telling her. Her suspicions deepened when she overheard another conversation. This time it wasn't just Nick. There was another voice, one she didn't recognize. "She's more vulnerable than I expected," the man said, his tone casual but pointed. "When are we moving forward?" "Soon," Nick replied. "I have everything under control." Control. The word sent chills down her spine. Miranda clenched her fists, her heart pounding. Whatever was happening, it was about her, and she wasn't going to sit idly by. For the first time since the accident, Miranda resolved to fight back. She might be blind, but she wasn't helpless. And if Nick thought he could manipulate her, he had underestimated her strength. Somewhere in the darkness, Miranda could sense the threads of her life slipping from her grasp. But as fear and anger churned within her, so did determination. She would find the truth, no matter what it cost her, even if it meant losing everything. The days after Miranda resolved to take control of her life were fraught with uncertainty. Each step she took was like navigating a maze blindfolded. Yet beneath her growing fear was an unrelenting fire, a determination to uncover the truth behind Nick's cryptic behavior. She began with her surroundings. Though the world outside her eyes was a void, she could still feel, hear, and intuit. Miranda learned to map the contours of their home, committing every step, piece of furniture and corner to memory. She grew deft at listening for the subtlest sounds. Nick's pacing footsteps, the faint creak of doors opening and closing, and the muted whispers of his conversations behind closed doors. The curious case of the missing documents. One morning, while Nick was at a business meeting, Miranda sat at the kitchen table, her hands resting on the smooth surface. Maria, their housekeeper, moved quietly in the background, the gentle clink of dishes signaling her presence. "Maria," Miranda began hesitantly, "do you still bring in the mail?" "Yes, Mrs. Ashford," Maria replied. "Mr. Morgan asked me to sort it for him, so he gets what's important." Miranda's brow furrowed. "And what happens to the rest?" "Most of it goes into the study. He said he'll deal with it later." Maria's tone was light, unaware of the suspicion brewing in Miranda's mind. "Would you mind bringing the mail to me tomorrow before he sees it?" Miranda asked, forcing a smile. "I'd like to help Nick catch up." Maria hesitated, then nodded. "Of course, ma'am, whatever you need." The following day, when the mail was delivered into her hands, Miranda's fingers glided over each envelope, searching for anything unusual. One in particular caught her attention, a thick package with the embossed logo of her family's law firm. "Maria," she said calmly, "can you describe this envelope to me?" "It's white with gold lettering from Ashford Legal Associates," Maria explained. "Thank you," Miranda murmured. "That will be all for now." The envelope was sealed, but Miranda could feel the weight of its contents. It wasn't just documents, it was answers. She stashed it in her personal desk drawer before Nick returned, resolving to find someone she trusted to read it aloud when the time was right. That evening, Nick seemed unusually tense. Miranda could hear it in his voice as he recounted his day. "Any news from the firm?" she asked casually, her head tilted in his direction. He hesitated. "Nothing you need to worry about." That phrase again, "nothing you need to worry about." Miranda's jaw tightened, but she let the moment pass, pretending to accept his words. Later that night, when Nick was in the shower, she slipped her phone from the nightstand. Though navigating it was a challenge, Miranda had memorized the position of certain buttons before her accident. With trembling fingers, she dialed a number she hadn't used in months. Her best friend, Claire. "Miranda?" Claire's voice was a mix of relief and surprise. "Oh my God, it's so good to hear from you." "Claire," Miranda whispered urgently, "I need your help." The next morning, Claire arrived under the guise of checking on Miranda's recovery. To Nick, she was just a concerned friend, one who had always been nosy but harmless. But as soon as they were alone, Claire pulled Miranda into a tight embrace. "What's going on?" Claire asked, her voice low. Miranda handed her the envelope. "I need you to read this, and don't let Nick see it." Claire's expression darkened as she scanned the documents inside. "Miranda," she began cautiously, "these are financial records. Transfers from Ashford Holdings to a private account, large amounts. It's under Nick's name." The room seemed to tilt beneath Miranda's feet. "How much are we talking about?" "Millions," Claire said softly. "This isn't normal. Have you authorized any of this?" Miranda shook her head, anger bubbling beneath her shock. "No, I trusted him." "Do you want me to take these to someone?" Claire asked. "A lawyer, maybe." "Not yet," Miranda said firmly. "I need to understand why he's doing this. If I confront him now, he'll only hide more." Over the next week, Miranda sharpened her senses, relying on Claire to quietly investigate Nick's actions. Meanwhile, Miranda began to test Nick's boundaries. "I want to attend the next board meeting," she announced over breakfast. Nick choked on his coffee. "Miranda, that's not a good idea. You're still recovering." "I may be blind, but I'm not incapable," she replied, her tone steely. "This is my company, Nick." He sighed, setting his cup down. "I'm only trying to protect you." "Protect me from what?" "The truth." The words hung in the air between them. Nick didn't answer. Instead, he excused himself, leaving his half-eaten breakfast on the table. Claire's discoveries only added to the growing unease. Through bank statements and legal filings, they uncovered a pattern of deceit. Nick was funneling money into offshore accounts and using Miranda's name to justify risky investments. The breaking point came when Claire found records of a property Nick had purchased, a secluded house in upstate New York. Miranda's heart sank as she realized Nick might have plans she couldn't even fathom. "I need to see that house," Miranda told Claire. "You can't just walk in blind, literally," Claire protested. "What if he's there?" "I'll find a way," Miranda insisted. "He's hiding something. I need to know what." That night, Miranda waited until Nick was asleep before slipping out of bed. Guided by touch, she made her way to his study, where she knew he kept a locked drawer. She had memorized the feel of the key he carried, and earlier that day she had swiped it while he was distracted. Inside the drawer, she found a folder labeled Project Cassandra. She couldn't read it herself, but the feel of the pages told her there were dozens of documents. Something big, something dangerous. As she stood there, heart pounding, she heard footsteps in the hallway. "Miranda." Nick's voice was sharp, his tone filled with suspicion. Stay tuned for the next chapter, where Miranda's confrontation with Nick takes an unexpected and dangerous turn. The tension builds, leading closer to the story's shocking revelations. Miranda's days began to feel like endless stretches of darkness, her once perfectly ordered life spiraling further out of her control. Despite Nick's insistence that he was handling everything, her instincts told her there was more happening than he let on. It wasn't just her blindness that unnerved her. It was the unsettling certainty that pieces of her life were being rearranged without her consent. She started small, testing her environment. At first, she counted her steps from the bedroom to the kitchen, then from the kitchen to her study. She traced the furniture with her fingers, memorizing its placement, and listened carefully to the sounds of the house, noting which floorboards creaked under Nick's steps and how the air shifted when someone entered a room. In her darkness, she began to create her own kind of map. One morning, as she sat at the kitchen table, Maria, their housekeeper, moved quietly in the background. Miranda could hear the faint rustling of mail being sorted, and curiosity piqued her. Nick had taken control of so many aspects of her life since the accident: her work, her communications, her decisions. Was he also intercepting her mail? "Maria," she asked, keeping her tone casual, "do you still bring in the mail?" "Yes, ma'am," Maria replied. "Mr. Morgan asked me to sort it for him. He said it would be easier this way." Miranda frowned. "And where does it go?" "Into his study, usually," Maria said. "But if there's something urgent, I leave it on the counter for him." "Would you mind bringing it to me first tomorrow?" Miranda asked, her voice light but firm. "I'd like to help Nick catch up." Maria hesitated for only a moment before agreeing. "Of course, Mrs. Ashford. Whatever you need." The next day, Maria handed Miranda a small stack of mail. Her fingers grazed over the envelopes, feeling for any unusual weight or texture. One stood out immediately. It was thick, with a raised emblem she recognized, the logo of Ashford Legal Associates, her family's law firm. Her pulse quickened as she slid it into the drawer of her desk before Nick returned. When Nick came home later, his footsteps were heavy, his tone clipped as he greeted her. She asked casually, "Anything interesting from the lawyers today?" There was a pause. "No," he said smoothly. "Nothing that can't wait." She bit back the retort that lingered on her tongue. Lying was a skill Nick seemed to be honing with alarming ease. Later that night, while Nick was in the shower, she retrieved her phone. Navigating it was a challenge without sight, but she had memorized certain buttons and gestures. After a few fumbled attempts, she called her best friend, Claire. When Claire answered, her voice was a mix of relief and concern. "Miranda! God, it's so good to hear from you." "Claire," Miranda whispered urgently, "I need your help." The following morning, Claire arrived under the pretense of checking in on Miranda. Nick, always polite to her friends, offered a brief chat before excusing himself to make calls in his study. Once he was out of earshot, Miranda handed the envelope to Claire. "Read it," Miranda said. Quietly, Claire's eyes scanned the pages, her expression darkening. "Miranda," she whispered, "these are financial records, transfers from Ashford Holdings to a private account. Large amounts." "How large?" Miranda asked, her voice tight. "Millions," Claire said softly, "and it's all under Nick's name." Miranda's stomach churned. "I didn't approve this." "Do you want me to take this to someone?" Claire asked. "Not yet," Miranda said firmly. "I need to understand why he's doing this." Over the next week, Claire became Miranda's unseen ally. While Miranda sharpened her senses at home, Claire dug deeper into Nick's dealings. She uncovered offshore accounts and purchases Miranda hadn't authorized, including a secluded property upstate. Miranda's unease deepened with each new discovery. One night, Miranda confronted Nick indirectly. "I want to attend the next board meeting," she said over dinner. Nick's reaction was swift. "Miranda, that's out of the question. You're still recovering." "I'm blind, not incapable," she countered. Nick sighed, his frustration barely concealed. "I'm only trying to protect you." "Protect me from what? The truth?" Her words cut through the room like glass, but Nick didn't reply. Instead, he excused himself, leaving his dinner untouched. That night, Miranda waited until she was certain Nick was asleep. Guided by touch and memory, she made her way to his study. She had memorized the feel of the key he kept on his keyring and had swiped it earlier that day. Her heart pounded as she unlocked his desk drawer and found a folder labeled Project Cassandra. She couldn't read it herself, but the weight of its contents told her it was significant. As she held the folder in her trembling hands, she heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching. "Miranda?" Nick's voice was sharp, his tone filled with suspicion. Miranda's heart raced as Nick's voice echoed in the doorway of the study. The folder in her hands felt heavier than it should, its weight a silent testament to the secrets it held. She forced her breath to steady, masking the turmoil within her. "What are you doing here?" Nick's tone was tight, clipped with suspicion. "I couldn't sleep," Miranda replied evenly. She placed the folder back into the drawer with deliberate care. "I was just trying to familiarize myself with the house again. I thought I'd come here and sit for a while." Nick's footsteps moved closer, slow and deliberate. "You should have called me. You know I don't want you wandering around alone. It's not safe." Her lips curved into a faint smile, though her grip on the desk betrayed her tension. "Nick, I'm not helpless. Besides, this is my house too. I need to feel comfortable in my own space." He didn't respond immediately. The air between them felt heavy, like a rope being slowly tightened. "You're right," he said finally, his tone softening. "I'm just worried about you. I don't want you to get hurt." His hand brushed against her arm, and she resisted the urge to pull away. "I appreciate it," she said, her voice steady, "but I need to figure things out for myself." Nick guided her back to their bedroom, his touch gentle but firm, and she allowed him to lead her. Yet her mind was far from calm. She now had a name for the secrets he was hiding, Project Cassandra, and she would stop at nothing to uncover what it meant. The following morning, Miranda reached out to Claire under the guise of needing a friendly visit. Claire arrived quickly, her presence a welcome relief in the tense atmosphere of the house. Together they retreated to the guest room, where Miranda felt safest, speaking freely. "He caught me last night," Miranda admitted in a low voice, "but I managed to put the folder back before he saw." "What did you find?" Claire asked, her curiosity edged with concern. "I couldn't read it," Miranda said, frustration creeping into her tone. "It was labeled Project Cassandra. Does that mean anything to you?" Claire shook her head. "Not yet, but I'll find out. I'll dig into it. Whatever this is, it's bigger than just a few offshore accounts." Miranda nodded, her jaw set with determination. "We're running out of time. If Nick suspects anything—" "We'll be careful," Claire assured her. "You're not in this alone." Days turned into a tense routine. Nick grew increasingly watchful, his presence more suffocating. He hovered during her phone calls, offered unsolicited help with the smallest tasks, and seemed to anticipate her every move. Miranda played the part of the dutiful wife, careful not to betray the growing firestorm within her. One afternoon, while Nick was out, Claire called with urgent news. "I found something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Project Cassandra. It's not just financial. It's tied to a land deal, something your company was supposed to have rejected years ago. But Nick revived it." "What kind of deal?" Miranda asked, gripping the phone tightly. "A resort," Claire explained. "A huge one. But the land it's being built on is a legal nightmare. Environmental restrictions, pending lawsuits. If this gets out, it could destroy the Ashford name." Miranda felt a cold sweat break across her skin. "Why would he do this?" "That's the million-dollar question," Claire said. "The accounts I traced show payments to lobbying firms, legal teams, even a private investigator. Nick's been working on this for months, maybe years." The magnitude of it all hit Miranda like a wave. Nick wasn't just siphoning money. He was orchestrating a scandal that could bring her legacy crashing down. That evening, as Miranda sat in the living room, she decided to push Nick for answers. When he returned from his meeting, she greeted him with a smile that masked her unease. "How was your day?" she asked, her tone casual. "Busy," he replied, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "Nothing exciting." "Good," she said, tilting her head, "because I've been thinking. I'd like to be more involved again, maybe attend a few meetings, get updates from the team." Nick's body tensed, and though she couldn't see his face, she could feel his discomfort. "Miranda, You know you don't need to worry about that right now. I've got everything under control. Her lips tightened into a thin line. I know you do, Nick, but it's still my company. I want to feel connected to it. He sat beside her, taking her hands in his. I understand, he said gently, but your health comes first. Let me handle this a little longer, okay? There it was again, that paternal tone, the one that simultaneously soothed and silenced her. She nodded, but inside, her resolve only hardened. Late that night, Miranda waited until Nick was asleep before slipping out of bed. Guided by touch and memory, she navigated her way back to his study. The drawer was locked again, but she had memorized the key's position on Nick's ring earlier that day. This time, she wasn't content to simply hold the folder. She ran her fingers over its contents, feeling the texture of papers, charts, and what felt like maps. Her fingertips landed on a small flash drive tucked into the corner of the folder. She slipped it into her pocket just as she heard the faint creak of the floorboards. Her breath caught. She froze, listening intently. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity before she finally moved again, carefully locking the drawer and returning to bed. The flash drive felt like a burning coal in her pocket, its presence both thrilling and terrifying. When she slipped back under the covers, Nick shifted beside her but didn't wake. Miranda lay there, her mind racing. Whatever was on that drive, it would bring her one step closer to the truth. But she would need Claire's help to uncover it, and she would have to move quickly. Her world was still dark, but she was beginning to see Nick for who he truly was, and it terrified her. Miranda's grip on the flash drive tightened as she sat in the guest room with Claire the next morning. It had taken all her willpower not to confront Nick outright. Her darkness had become her greatest shield, allowing her to observe without being observed. She handed the drive to Claire, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "Find out what's on it," she said. "We don't have time to waste." Claire nodded, her determination matching Miranda's. "I'll call as soon as I know." As Claire left, Miranda felt the weight of silence settle around her. Every moment without answers was a reminder of her vulnerability, but also her strength. She had spent weeks relying on her other senses, sharpening her instincts. Nick's secrets wouldn't stay buried much longer. That evening, Nick came home earlier than usual. His footsteps were heavier, his tone sharper as he greeted her. Something had shifted, and Miranda could feel it. She carefully hid her unease behind a smile. "How was your day?" she asked. "Long," Nick replied curtly. He sat across from her, the air between them charged with unspoken tension. "We need to talk." Miranda tilted her head, feigning innocence. "About what?" "I know you've been digging into things," he said, his voice low and deliberate. "You've been talking to Claire, going through my office." Her heart skipped a beat, but she didn't falter. "Of course I've been asking questions, Nick. I'm blind, not oblivious. You've been hiding things from me." He leaned forward, his presence looming. "You don't understand what's at stake." "Then explain it to me," she demanded. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're stealing from me, from my company." Nick exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. For a moment he seemed torn, as if deciding whether to share the truth or maintain his facade. "I did what I had to do," he said finally. "Ashford Holdings was bleeding money. The board was circling like vultures. I made deals to protect you, to protect us." Miranda's stomach churned. "Don't you dare pretend this was for me." "Claire found the accounts, Nick, the property, the payments. You weren't saving me, you were using me." Nick's chair scraped against the floor as he stood abruptly. "You have no idea what I've sacrificed for you," he snapped. "I kept you in the dark because I knew you couldn't handle the truth." Her laugh was sharp, cutting through the tension. "The irony, Nick, keeping me in the dark. How poetic." Before he could respond, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway broke the moment. Nick glanced toward the window, his jaw tightening. "Expecting someone?" Miranda asked, her tone icy. Nick's silence spoke volumes. A moment later, Claire burst through the front door, her voice echoing down the hallway. "Miranda!" Nick moved toward her, but Claire stood her ground, brandishing a folder. "I know everything, Nick," she said, her voice steady. "And so does she." "What are you talking about?" Nick growled, his calm unraveling. Claire stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. "Project Cassandra. The land deals, the bribes, it's all here. You've been siphoning millions to prop up a venture that could ruin Ashford Holdings. And let's not forget the offshore accounts in your name." Nick's face darkened. "You have no proof." Claire smirked, holding up the flash drive. "I think this says otherwise." Miranda rose slowly, her hands finding the edge of the table for support. "Is it true, Nick?" she asked, her voice quiet but filled with resolve. "Were you planning to let my company take the fall while you walked away with everything?" His silence was deafening. Miranda's heart broke in the stillness, but her resolve only strengthened. "Get out," she said, her tone commanding. Nick hesitated. "Miranda, listen to me." "I said get out," she shouted, her voice shaking with anger and betrayal. Claire moved to her side as Nick stormed out of the house. The door slammed shut behind him, and the silence that followed was deafening. The weeks that followed were a blur of revelations and recovery. With Claire's help, Miranda took swift action to protect her company. The stolen funds were traced and recovered, the corrupt deals unraveled. Nick's betrayal had left scars, but Miranda refused to let him destroy everything she had built. One morning, as she sat in her study, the sunlight warming her face, she received a call from her doctor. There was a new treatment, a possibility slim but real that her sight could be restored. For the first time in weeks, hope blossomed within her. The procedure was a success. When the bandages were removed, the world returned to her in fragments of light and color. She blinked against the brightness, tears streaming down her face as she looked at Claire, who stood beside her, smiling through her own tears. "You did it," Claire said softly. "You fought your way back." Miranda nodded, her heart full. She had faced the darkness and emerged stronger. Nick's shadow no longer loomed over her. She had reclaimed her life, her company, and her sense of self. As she stepped outside into the sunlight, she felt the warmth of the world on her skin and saw the path ahead with clarity, both literal and metaphorical. She had been blinded, but now she saw everything, and this time, no one would take her power away.